There comes a moment when holding on starts to hurt more than letting go. When you've cried enough, explained enough, hoped enough, and you finally realize that no amount of trying will make him see your worth. That's the moment your healing begins, not when he apologizes, not when he comes back, but when you decide that you deserve peace more than you crave his attention. Release him completely doesn't mean pretending he never existed. It means freeing yourself from the version of you that kept waiting for him to care. It's about removing his fingerprints from your heart, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. You see, the hardest part isn't losing him, it's unlearning the habit of needing him. It's waking up and not checking your phone for his messages. It's hearing a song that once reminded you of him and realizing it no longer hurts. It's the quiet moments when you start to feel whole again, not because he came back, but because you stopped needing him to. That's the kind of power that changes everything. This isn't about revenge or proving him wrong. This is about your peace, your energy, your freedom. Because the truth is, he doesn't deserve the kind of emotional real estate you've been giving him. He's not supposed to live in your thoughts rent-free while you keep paying the price for his mistakes. Releasing him completely is the act of reclaiming your space, your focus, and your heart. It's saying, you no longer exist in my world, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. And when you do that, when you truly let go, something magical happens. You stop waiting for him to regret losing you. You stop hoping he'll finally see your worth, because you see it now. You stop needing closure from him because you gave it to yourself. You stop feeling like you lost something because you realize you actually gained yourself back. And that's when you'll look back and think, he never really mattered, not compared to the peace I have now. Every time you think of him, every time you replay that story in your mind, you give it new life. You breathe energy into something that was meant to fade. You keep feeding a ghost that should have long disappeared. The truth is, he mattered once, but not in the way your heart keeps pretending he still does. He was a chapter, not the entire book, yet you've been rereading that same page, trying to make sense of why it ended, instead of realizing it ended because it was meant to. The pain you feel isn't from his absence, it's from the meaning you continue to give to his memory. We often glorify what we've lost. We turn the past into poetry and the person who hurt us into a symbol of love. But if you were to look back without the filter of nostalgia, you'd see the truth. It wasn't as beautiful as you remember. The moments you miss were mixed with confusion, disappointment, and constant questioning of your worth. You kept trying to fix something that was already breaking you, but your heart, desperate for comfort, keeps romanticizing the parts that hurt less. That's what keeps you stuck, not him, but the story you tell yourself about him. You see, the reason it's so hard to release him isn't because he was special. It's because you made him special in your mind. You gave him a role that he didn't earn. You placed meaning where there was only habit, and now you mistake that attachment for love. But real love doesn't make you shrink, doubt yourself, or fight to be seen. What you called love was often you trying to prove your worth to someone who couldn't recognize it. So when you think about releasing him, understand that you're not letting go of love. You're letting go of the illusion you built around him. When you stop giving meaning to his memory, something powerful happens. The emotional fog begins to clear. You start to see the situation for what it truly was, not what you hoped it could be. You stop interpreting every silence as a message, every glance as a sign, every song as a reminder. You begin to detach emotionally, not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. You stop feeding the story. You stop replaying the pain. You stop looking for closure in a person who no longer deserves to occupy space in your heart. The moment you choose to stop giving meaning to his memory, you begin to take your power back. You no longer let your mind wander into the what-ifs. or the maybe one days. You stop trying to decode a man who has already shown you who he is. You stop trying to find lessons in his silence or depth in his indifference. Instead, you bring the focus back to you, your growth, your peace, your future. Because the more you focus on him, the less you have left for yourself. Releasing him completely means removing the pedestal you once placed him on. It means remembering that just because someone mattered once doesn't mean they get to matter forever. You are allowed to move on. You are allowed to stop caring. You are allowed to rewrite your story without him in it. Because he was never the destination. He was a detour that led you back to yourself. And once you understand that, you'll stop asking, "What did he mean to me?" and start asking, "What did I learn about me?" That's when you'll truly begin to heal, not when you forget him, but when he no longer defines how you feel. We chase closure like it's the final key to peace, thinking that if we could just get him to explain why, to apologize, or to admit what he did, we'd finally be able to move on. But here's the truth: the same person who broke you cannot be the one to heal you. The same voice that caused your pain will never be able to give you peace. When someone has already shown you disregard, waiting for them to give you closure is like standing in the rain and expecting not to get wet. You can't ask for healing from the same place that wounded you. The idea of closure is comforting because it gives us a sense of control. We believe that if we could just understand what happened, if we could make sense of it, we could release it. But closure rarely comes in the form of answers. It comes from acceptance, from realizing that some people leave without explanation, some relationships end without resolution, and some questions never get answered. And that's okay, because closure isn't something you wait for. It's something you create. The truth is, you don't need him to acknowledge what he did for you to heal. You don't need him to see your worth for it to exist. When you stop waiting for him to make peace with your pain, you begin to make peace with yourself. You take your power back the moment you say, "He doesn't get to decide when my healing starts." Because if you keep waiting for him to do the right thing, you're letting him control your timeline. You're giving him emotional power long after he's gone. Think about it. How many times have you written and deleted that message, replayed the last conversation, or fantasized about what you'd say if he suddenly reached out? That's not closure, that's attachment disguised as curiosity. It's your heart looking for something to hold on to, even if it's pain. But what if you gave yourself permission to not need his validation? What if you stopped chasing understanding and started chasing peace? Because the truth is, you already know enough. You know how it felt. You know what you gave. You know what he didn't. That's enough to move on. When you seek closure from him, you're really asking for accountability from someone who wasn't ready to take it. You're hoping that he'll suddenly develop the emotional depth he never showed when it mattered. But people don't magically grow empathy because you want them to. They grow when life forces them to, and sometimes that moment comes long after you're gone. You don't need to witness his regret for it to be real. You don't need to see his pain to validate your own. Your healing doesn't depend on his evolution. The most powerful form of closure is acceptance. Accepting that he did what he did, that you loved him anyway, and that it wasn't enough to keep him. Accepting that not everyone you love will know how to love you back. Acceptance isn't weakness, it's emotional freedom. It's saying, "I don't need to understand why he left. I just need to understand that I deserve better." That's when the weight starts to lift. When you stop seeking closure from him, you begin to close the door yourself. You stop checking your phone, stop waiting for an apology that may never come, stop giving him access to your emotions. You stop making him the author of your ending. You take the pen back and finish the story on your terms. Because the moment you stop waiting for him to give you peace, you create it. You close the chapter not with his permission, but with your power. And that's when you finally realize closure was never about him. It was always about you. Detachment isn't about pretending you never cared. It's about realizing that caring doesn't mean clinging. It's about shifting your focus from what you've lost to what you're gaining, your peace, your clarity, your strength. When you detach emotionally, you're not erasing the love you once felt. You're reclaiming the power you gave away. You're saying, I can love deeply, but I can also let go completely. That's emotional maturity, not coldness, but control. Many people confuse detachment with indifference. They think detachment means shutting your heart down, acting like you don't feel anything. But true detachment is the opposite. It's feeling everything, the hurt, the longing, the disappointment, and still choosing not to be controlled by it. It's acknowledging, yes, this hurts. Yes, I cared, but no, I will not let this define me. That's strength in its purest form. Because when you can sit with pain without letting it consume you, you've already won. Emotional detachment starts when you stop feeding the connection. You stop replaying old conversations in your mind, stop looking for hidden meanings in his silence, stop checking what he's doing online. Every time you stop yourself from reaching out, you're reprogramming your mind to stop craving his presence. You're breaking the addiction, one quiet choice at a time, because love can become a habit, and detachment is the process of unlearning that habit. When you truly begin to detach, something powerful happens. You start to see things clearly. You see the relationship for what it was, not for what you hoped it would be. You see his actions without the illusion of potential clouding your judgment. You see that holding on was costing you more peace than the relationship ever gave you happiness. And in that moment, detachment doesn't feel like loss anymore. It feels like relief. You begin to understand that detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. You no longer need to respond to every emotion that surfaces. You no longer let your heart chase every what if. You learn that sometimes the greatest act of love for yourself is silence. Detachment teaches you patience with your healing, because it's not about waking up one day and feeling nothing. It's about gradually feeling lighter, less triggered, more in control. One day you'll think of him and realize you don't ache anymore. That's detachment. It's important to remember that detachment doesn't erase your history, it redefines it. It turns pain into perspective. It reminds you that not everything or everyone is meant to stay, and that's not failure, that's life. You learn that closure doesn't come from words, it comes from distance. You learn that healing doesn't come from revisiting the past. It comes from refusing to reopen wounds that no longer deserve your attention. Emotional detachment is the act of choosing yourself even when your heart still whispers his name. It's telling yourself, I can miss him and still move on. I can love him and still let go. Because moving on doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It means you finally realized your love deserves to be reciprocated, not wasted. It means you stopped chasing peace in places that only gave you chaos. In the end, detachment isn't about forgetting him, it's about remembering you. It's about coming back to your center, your calm, your power. It's about realizing that your happiness was never supposed to depend on someone else's consistency. You learn that love can be beautiful and still not be right. You learn that letting go isn't losing, it's choosing freedom over fantasy. And the moment you detach, not because you're angry, but because you're finally at peace, that's when you know you've truly healed. When you stop seeking closure, you stop giving someone else power over your peace. Because closure isn't something someone hands you, it's something you decide to give yourself. We often chase closure as if it's the final key to our healing, waiting for that one last conversation, that one final explanation that makes everything make sense. But the truth is, most of the time, the closure you're waiting for never comes. And even if it does, it rarely satisfies you. Because closure doesn't come from understanding why they did what they did. It comes from accepting that they did it. It comes from deciding that their behavior no longer needs your energy or your analysis. We crave closure because we want control. We think that if we just knew why, we could stop hurting. But real closure doesn't come from the other person's words. It comes from your own decision to stop giving their actions meaning. It comes from the quiet moment you realize that no explanation will ever undo what happened. You can spend days, weeks, even years trying to piece together the why. But all that time, you're keeping yourself attached to the story. And attachment is what keeps you stuck. The moment you stop chasing answers and start accepting reality, you set yourself free. Sometimes closure looks like silence. It looks like walking away without saying a word. It looks like choosing not to text, not to argue, not to remind them of your worth. Because they already knew your worth, they just weren't ready to meet it. And no speech, no goodbye, no perfectly written message will change that. The power is in walking away without the need to prove anything. The power is in letting your absence say what your words never could. The truth is, closure is a form of self-respect. It's saying, I don't need you to validate my pain. I don't need your permission to move on. It's understanding that some stories don't end neatly. Some just stop abruptly, painfully, without warning, and that's okay. Not every chapter gets a clean conclusion, but that doesn't mean the story wasn't valuable. It just means it served its purpose and ended when it was supposed to. When you create your own closure, you stop waiting for justice or understanding. You start focusing on your healing instead of their explanation. You stop replaying what went wrong and start rebuilding what's next. You realize that closure doesn't come from a conversation. It comes from a decision to prioritize your peace over your curiosity, your future over your past. Because the truth is, you don't need closure from them. You need closure from the version of you that kept hoping they'd change. Sometimes the most powerful closure is indifference. It's waking up one day and realizing you don't care what they're doing anymore. You don't check their updates. You don't wonder who they are with. You don't analyze what went wrong. You just let go, not because you forgot, but because you finally accepted that holding on wasn't going to change the outcome. That kind of peace can't be given by anyone else. It's earned through your own strength. You'll know you've found closure when you stop needing to win the breakup. When you stop comparing your progress to theirs, believe that being EBELIEVE, that being MEANS, being WEAK, or being mile, what's behind means being weak or being left behind, when you no longer need to show them what they lost. Because by that point, you'll realize they lost something they may never find again, someone genuine, loyal, and loving. And you'll realize you didn't lose anything, you simply made space for something better. True closure doesn't come with dramatic endings or final words. It comes in stillness. It comes in the quiet confidence that you don't need to revisit the past to move forward. It comes in the way you start smiling again, not because everything makes sense, but because you no longer need it to. That's the moment you stop living for explanations and start living for peace. That's when you know you've given yourself the closure you were always waiting for. Healing doesn't happen the day you walk away. It happens in the days that follow, in the moments when your heart aches, but you choose not to go back. Healing is not a single event. It's a process of reclaiming yourself piece by piece. It's waking up each morning and choosing not to check your phone for his messages. It's hearing his name and feeling less of that sting every time. It's finding new habits, new dreams, new ways to fill the spaces he used to occupy. You don't heal by pretending it never hurt. You heal by letting it hurt without letting it destroy you. There will be days when you miss him, even though you know he's not good for you. That's not weakness, that's withdrawal. You're detaching from something that once felt like home, even if it was built on chaos. Healing asks you to sit in that discomfort without running back to what broke you. Because every time you resist the urge to reach out, you teach your heart that it can survive without him. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you're building emotional muscle. Every time you cry and still refuse to go back, you're proving to yourself that your peace matters more than temporary comfort. Healing is deeply personal. It's not about forgetting him. It's about remembering yourself. It's about returning to the person you were before you started doubting your worth. When you release someone completely, you make space for your true self to re-emerge. You begin to see that your value was never tied to his attention, that your beauty was never defined by his validation, that your happiness was never meant to depend on his love. You start to rebuild a relationship with yourself, one built on consistency, respect, and care, and that kind of healing creates a strength that no heartbreak can shake. There's a moment in every healing journey where it feels like nothing is changing. You'll think, I should be over this by now. But that's just part of the process. Healing is slow because your heart needs time to adjust to peace after living in chaos. It takes time for your body to stop expecting the adrenaline of disappointment. It takes time to learn how to be calm again, so don't rush it. Every day you stay away, you're healing. Every moment you choose peace, you're healing. Every time you put your energy into yourself instead of the past, you're healing. You'll know you're healing when you stop needing answers, when you stop replaying the past and start focusing on what's next. When you can think about him and feel nothing, not anger, not sadness, just neutrality. That's the sign that the emotional tie has finally been cut. That's the point where his memory no longer controls your emotions. You can look back with compassion, not longing. You can wish him well without wishing him back. The beauty of healing is that it doesn't make you harder, it makes you wiser. It teaches you how to protect your energy, how to recognize red flags sooner, how to walk away faster. You stop confusing chemistry with connection. You stop mistaking inconsistency for mystery. You stop accepting breadcrumbs when you deserve the whole feast. Healing gives you clarity not about him, but about you. And when you finally reach that place of peace, you realize the person you became through this process is someone stronger, softer, and far more self-aware than before. You realize that losing him wasn't a tragedy. It was the beginning of your transformation. Because every tear, every sleepless night, every wave of pain led you back to yourself. And that's the ultimate reward of healing, not getting over him, but rediscovering you. When you finally release him completely, the world feels different. Quieter, lighter at first. That silence might feel uncomfortable, like something is missing. But soon you'll realize that what's missing is the chaos you mistook for connection. You'll start to see that peace was never boring. It was what you were searching for all along. When you truly let go, you stop waiting for his messages, his apologies, his attention. You stop needing him to see your worth because you've already claimed it for yourself. That's the moment when everything shifts, when his absence no longer feels like a loss, but a liberation. Freedom after heartbreak isn't just about cutting him off physically. It's about releasing the emotional weight you've been carrying. It's about untangling yourself from the memories that used to haunt you and realizing they no longer define you. The moment you stop checking his social media, stop replaying old conversations, stop analyzing every moment, you create room for something better, peace. You start living for yourself again, not in reaction to him, not in reflection of what was, but in alignment with what's next. Freedom isn't loud, it's quiet confidence, the calm that comes from knowing you're okay without him. There's something powerful that happens when you stop needing closure, revenge, or recognition. You realize that the best revenge was never making him regret, it was you rising in silence. The best proof that you've moved on isn't your success, your glow up, or your new relationship. It's your indifference. It's the fact that he no longer has the ability to disturb your peace. That's true freedom when his name no longer stirs emotion, when his memory no longer feels heavy, when your life finally belongs to you again. Freedom also means forgiving yourself for staying too long, for ignoring red flags, for loving someone who didn't know how to love you back. Because you can't move forward if you're still carrying guilt from the past, you have to understand you did the best you could with what you knew then. The lesson wasn't about keeping him, it was about learning your limits, your strength, your worth. Once you forgive yourself, you stop repeating the same emotional patterns. You stop chasing validation, you stop accepting less. You start walking with your head high, knowing that your peace is the price of admission to your life, and not everyone gets to afford it. Freedom feels like waking up and realizing your mood doesn't depend on someone else's presence. It's looking in the mirror and finally liking what you see, not because someone told you to, but because you know you've earned that peace. It's rediscovering the things you love, your hobbies, your goals, your friendships, the parts of your identity that might have faded while you were trying to keep that relationship alive. When you release him completely, you stop living in reaction to pain and start living in pursuit of purpose. You begin to notice how light you feel without the constant emotional tension. You start to enjoy solitude without it feeling lonely. You stop craving his energy and start protecting your own, and that's when you know you've not only healed, you've evolved. You've risen above the version of yourself who thought you couldn't survive without him. You've stepped into a life that's no longer about proving your worth, but about living it every day. Freedom is not just the absence of him, it's the presence of you. It's your laughter returning, your joy rebuilding, your heart expanding again. It's the moment you look back and realize he no longer defines you. His chapter in your story is over, and you're finally writing again, this time with no regret and no trace of the past holding you back. That's not just letting go, that's liberation. When you finally release him completely, when you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop hoping, something extraordinary happens. You remember who you are. You realize that you never needed him to validate your worth. You only needed to see it for yourself. The peace that follows isn't loud or dramatic. It's calm, steady, and deeply empowering. It's waking up one morning and realizing you didn't think about him at all. It's smiling for no reason. It's feeling at home in your own skin again. Releasing him completely isn't about pretending he never mattered. It's about accepting that his role in your life has ended. It's about closing that chapter with grace, not resentment. You don't need to prove anything to him. You don't need to make him regret, because your peace, your silence, your glow, those are the loudest statements you could ever make. When you stop needing to be understood, you gain clarity. When you stop needing closure, you gain freedom. And when you stop needing him, you gain yourself. The truth is, you were never meant to stay small just to fit into someone else's limited love. You were meant to expand, to grow, to love in ways that don't break you. Releasing him isn't the end of your story, it's the return to it. It's stepping back into your own power, your own rhythm, your own joy. You don't lose by walking away. You win by finally choosing yourself. And when you do, when you stand tall, calm, and unbothered, he'll feel the silence. He'll sense the distance. He'll see the version of you that no longer waits, no longer pleads, no longer settles. And that's when his regret will begin. But by then, it won't matter because you'll already be gone. At peace, whole, untouchable.